In 1975, Australian engineers Peter Virgil and Kim Ryrie saw that the future of music was electronic, and they founded their own company to make instruments, Fairlight. Fairlight would make multi-purpose synthesizers and samplers that was eagerly taken by prospective musicians like Peter Gabriel, Kate Bush, and Jean-Michel Jarre. In Sweden especially, it seems a lot of people were enamored with all the glamour of Fairlight. There was a ZX Spectrum game made by Börje Janjeborg that shares the same name, and it was also the namesake for a new Swedish demogroup, Fairlight. Fairlight! Of all the demogroups that came and went, demogroups that cracked software or have left traces in computer culture, demogroups that pushed the boundaries of processors or have just made amazing computer art, Fairlight are a name that absorb most others and take precedence. Fairlight are an indescribably legendary group, legends beyond legends. If the demo scene were jazz music, Fairlight would be their Louis Armstrong. Fairlight started in April 1987, and they still operate and have many members today, almost 40 years now, and they're still kicking and making demos and cracks. Fairlight have been around longer than many rock bands. If you want to bullshit your way for a dinner party, and all your hosts are having a conversation about the demo scene, Fairlight are absolutely a name you need to know. Fairlight was started by Swedish sceners Strider and Black Shadow in April 1987, specifically named after the synth. They would quickly be joined by Gollum, Nighthawk, Woodo, The Hobbit, Gandalf, and Dragonlance. As you can see, there's a Tolkien theme running with all these names. Black Shadow was a huge fan of Tolkien and got Strider to read The Lord of the Rings, which got him hooked. In 1987, they were really prized for being Commodore 64 crackers, fondly remembered today for the legendary intros they had for many of the early cracks, with a big bright red logo and a big circulating green raster bar. The music here was pilfered from a game called Druid 2. This kind of setup would be imitated and parodied in many tributes to Fairlight since. In the last episode with Eaglesoft, we've seen how cutthroat the cracking competition can be, and Strider, of Fairlight, understood this more than anyone, but he still aimed to make the group the quickest one to deliver software, so he had to make sure they had a pipeline. See, Strider, who was a high schooler, would work a part-time job in a computer shop in Malmö. This allowed him to have the first day access to any newly released games. Malmö was a Swedish town way down on the southern shore, and the group's main cracker, Gollum, was living in Ronneby, which was 200 kilometers away to the east. So a game would need to first be acquired by Strider, then sent over to Gollum so he could crack it, and then sent back to Strider so he can distribute the cracked copy through all the channels, which mainly meant the high school he was attending at the time. Regular mail wouldn't do, it was too slow. Instead, there was a train line going from Malmö through Ronneby, and in a sally bit of opportunism, Strider would go over to the junior train conductors and bribe them with chocolate bars, if only they would deliver this cassette tape to his good friend waiting over at Ronneby. This daring feat of bravado was what made Fairlight top of the line in the European cracking scene, and no doubt they were proud of it. Here's one of the scrollers. In the greetings, they give a shout out for Eaglesoft, which is neat. Eaglesoft and Fairlight obviously admired each other. Another group they greet is Triad, who were also really famous in the Swedish demo scene, and were also their biggest rivals. Fairlight vs Triad, that was the main rivalry in Sweden during that time.
Pray that you will get an invitation to our great copy party in Stockholm in December. Fucking's the watcher of the silence, you'll not destroy this party.
The scroller text mentioned fuckings. Fuckings are like the opposite of greetings. If greetings mean you're sending positive feelings and well wishes to people you admire, fuckings are you sending essentially hate energy to people or groups you don't like. For example, fuckings to Activision Blizzard, Warner Bros. And Ubisoft. Fuckings over to the war criminals in the Russian and Israeli governments. Fuckings over to Kyle Boss. This specific crack show was made for the game Combat School, published by Ocean Software and ported from an arcade game by Konami. In the last level of this game, in a classic video game bent, you get to go save the US president who's been taken hostage by terrorists.
Now you can train yourself to kill communists and Iranians.
One thing that you'll unmistakably see as a running theme in early Fairlights is the slogan "Kill Commies" and similar variants. An important thing to remember is that back in the 80s, when people were still living in the middle of the Cold War, and especially in Central Europe, plenty of sceners who lived in both sides of the Iron Curtain, meaning I'm including East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary here, would bond over a shared hatred of state collectivism, and this was in their day a truly legitimate grievance. Just remember my Berlin Bear video. So this is a sentiment that was shared through BBSs among both Western and Eastern European nations, this blind hatred for communism and longing for a life in a more liberal, democratized society. That these Swedish adolescents would share into it makes sense, and young demosceners were also big fans of American action hero movies of that era, which were also certainly popularizing the US versus the USSR sentiment. The biggest push of this anti-communist sentiment comes from Strider, who actually comes from a Croat family. Yeah, Strider's real name is Tony Krvaric. His parents moved from what was then Yugoslavia into Sweden, where they felt pressured by President Tito's communist regime, and so in Sweden they started a family business. And I get that. I wouldn't exactly call life in Yugoslavia perfect, even if it did do better than many of the other Eastern Bloc states. So for Tony growing up, this was quite important. He had the luck to grow up in a liberal country, and as he likes to share plenty of times, as a kid he was inspired by his greatest American hero, Ronald Reagan. You know, the old Gipper, the old shootin' cowboy movie star, trickler of economics, nuke-selling Nicaragua-dwelling stomper, Star Wars and Transformers fan, the old ages bung son of a gun, Sir Radisson of socialized medicine, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Tony astutely loved listening to Reagan's anti-communist and pro-capitalist rhetoric. So the moment Strider came of age and realized that opening his independent businesses in Sweden would make his company subject to immense taxes, Tony did the most sensible thing. Leave the demo scene, become an American citizen, move to San Diego, and there he joined the Republican Party, becoming the San Diego Republican Party chairman, opening a capital management company, and becoming an ardent MAGA supporter. If you're going to look into Tony's social media, please beware. He leaves countless truly concerning right-wing dog whistles, and that's why I'm going to leave it. It's apparent the two of us would never get along, and seeing that in a demo scene icon just really makes me sad.
So much for a Croat, am I right?
But we shouldn't let Strider's ideology sully the collective triumphs of Fairlight. He's not really active in it anymore anyway. Instead, I want to remind that Fairlight has one of the most talented artists in the entire demo scene, the Sarge, who joined in late 1987. I'll talk about his amazing pixel art in previous videos, and he's one of my biggest inspirations. And another Fairlight alumnus, Pantaloon, has went on to become a programmer in DICE, the Swedish game dev that made the Battlefront and Mirror's Edge games. Fairlight are also eminent on YouTube, doing what they can for their parts to keep the demo scene alive, and also to bring the demo scene to a wider audience of outsiders, especially younger people. Their channel, Fairlight TV, has a lot of great stuff, and I absolutely recommend subscribing to it. But not before subscribing to me, you handles. And yet still, the most incredible thing about Fairlight is these guys still crack games, right? If you're a PC and console gamer from the 90s and onwards and you were a chronic pirate, there's no way you never came across a Fairlight crack. These guys crack like legendary titles like The Sims, Silent Hill 2, Resident Evil 4, even Elden Ring, man. Fairlights have left behind a trail of over 1,000 cracked games, and still counting. One of the most recent cracks, funnily enough, is the Lord of the Rings Gollum game, so in a sense the influence of Gollum went full circle. It should be noted, regrettably, that managing a notorious cracking group like Fairlights comes at a serious risk. In 2004, prominent crackers of the group got busted by the FBI in a sting called Operation Fastlink. And not only that, but fellow cracking groups like Callisto, Echelon, and Class all got caught in the crossfire. One of the Fairlight members, Basilisk, had a sentence of 3 years, 200 hours of community service, and had to pay 15 grand. Fairlight had a colourful history, probably the longest and most colourful out of any demo group that I know, and it's still truly awesome how they're still running and take new generations of coders to carry the group's name even today. They won first place at last year's Revision demo party. So even in spite of the FBI buzz and the occasional hard days, they still found the time to crack games and make demos and be active in the scene at large. And that's what makes Fairlight, in my eyes, the platonic ideal of everything that the demo scene stands for. And so, Fairlight, thank you for your continued devotion. If there were ever 3 letters that we in the demo scene would always cheer for, I think we all know what they would be. FLT, we salute you.